Hello friends, and surprise! One more tribe that we'll be going over before the waiting time. The New World Beast tribe that has made their way to Eorzea, applying themselves as mercenaries and adventurers. Large lizard folk with relatively little lore to look at. Today we'll be going over the mysterious and often misunderstood Mamool Ja.
Hello there, everyone. I couldn't think of an intro, so here's a lizard. Her name is Stoliza, and she won't let go. You wanna let go? You wanna hold me? Oh, hello. Look at the camera. The Mamool Ja are also lizards, so that kind of ties together, right?
The Mamool Ja, the third-person speaking lizard folk from the mysterious New World continent to the far west of Eorzea, or what they call it themselves, the continent of Mamook. Now, at the time of making this video, this tribe has very little lore released about them, and that'll almost certainly change if/when we ever visit the New World continent in future expansions. But with that said, the Mamool Ja have been in Final Fantasy XIV since the game's release, and I feel it only right to at least review what little we know about them right now. So here we go, the at the time of recording known lore of the Mamool Ja. Before we even begin, we need to first discuss what Mamool Ja is. And by that I mean what the actual word itself means. Mamool Ja. This term is kinda unique because it's not actually a race in the same way we say Hyur or Elizin. It's more of a nation, like Limsa, Laminza or Gradania. A people's group comprised of many different races under a single banner. However, at the same time, it's also kind of a race because all these people's group are very similar to each other. You see, the people's group who are blanketed under the term Mamool Ja are actually three distinct yet very closely related tribes. Not the same race, but are so closely related with their culture so interwoven, they may as well be the same race. Think of it like the term house cat. These are all house cats, but they're all different breeds. And no, this wasn't an excuse to put cat pictures in this video. Okay, maybe it was. The tribes that make up the Mamool Ja are the Hubigo, Buniwa, and Dopro. So let's go over these tribes' physical characteristics. What makes them different? Well, the Hubigo are marked by light brown scales and having a very large crest on their head. They are physically much stronger than the two other tribes, but not very adept at magic. Thus, the Hubigo most often train as melee infantry or as spear throwers or archers. This tribe also seems to be the people's group who are most prone to exploration or allowed to explore in their culture, and are by far the largest group that is currently in Eorzea. The Buniwa are marked by having blue-green tinged scales, no crest on their head, and, most notably, having very large chameleon-like eyes. They are physically the weakest of the three tribes, but are gifted with a very deep reservoir of aether, and thus are all naturally born spellcasters. They most often fill the ranks of casters, healers, and spiritual leaders. Little fun fact, these guys are predominantly blue mages, as that's the magic that is native to their lands, and the magic that is apparently most widespread on that continent. Lastly, there is the Dopero. This tribe has a spotted or smeared looking scale color pattern, most often greyish bluish in color. They have no crest on their heads, and their eyes are very similar looking to that of the Hubigo. This tribe is naturally gifted as beast handlers and cavalry riders. They just somehow are able to understand and handle animals better than anyone else can. Currently, we have only seen a single Dopero in Eorzea. This guy, Mamool Ja, in the Wanderer's Palace Hard dungeon. Now let's talk about their diet. All of these tribes are omnivorous and generally eat a actually very rich and varied diet. One of their traditional meals is creating cornmeal bread or cornmeal tortillas, then wrapping various meats, vegetables, or a mix of both in them. Basically, the Mamool Ja make tacos, enchiladas, gorditas, quesadillas, and well, I'm pretty sure you can get a hint on what their cultural diet is based on. Speaking of culture, let's talk about how they are unified into one people by looking at their culture and society. What is the unifying glue that keeps the Mamool Ja together? That would be their leader, what they call their autar, their ruler with absolute power. The autar rule over the free tribes and bind them into a singular society. Underneath the autar, each tribe has their own leader, a king or queen who runs the day-to-day affairs of their people's group, but they are fully beholden to the autar's whims. But how does a Mamool Ja become autar? Well, not just anyone can become leader of the Mamool Ja. Only special individuals who are born with two heads. Now let's just hold up a bit and explain why only two-headed individuals can become rulers in their culture. In Mamool Ja society, though it isn't forbidden, it is very taboo for the three different tribes to intermarry and do the dirty for the baby. Outside of a very special religious ceremony. We don't know what this ceremony is called, nor exactly what happens during it, but what we do know is that individuals wed during this ceremony are always marrying someone of a different tribe, symbolically and literally binding their tribes together. When these couples consummate their marriage, they are sometimes, quote, blessed with two-headed offsprings, one head being of the father's tribe and the other head being of the mother's tribe. These special children have much higher intellect, size, and physical strength than that of their one-headed counterparts. In Mamool Ja culture, any born with two heads are called blessed siblings and are immediately groomed for leadership because they are one born of two tribes and could potentially become the autar. And well, if they don't become the autar, they all become great generals or leaders for their people. Basically, if a Mamool Ja has two heads, it's guaranteed to be in some leadership position. But from all the blessed siblings that are born, how is one selected to rule when their current autar dies? That is through their display of military prowess. When these two-headed Mamool Ja reach maturity, they are given allowance to form warbands. Basically their own personal military band or even small army. These warbands consist of their single-headed kin from any tribe that would follow them. Though it appears that the single-headed Mamool Ja prefer to join warbands where one of their leaders' heads is of their own tribe. When a warband is formed, it goes out and practically consistently and near endlessly seek to outdo other warbands. For the blessed siblings to display their military prowess, they either have their warbands fight against each other, trying to force the other to submit, or they fight alongside one another against a common enemy, competing to see who would win a more glorious battle. Or they would go out to some faraway land to obtain riches and glory doing quests, or just straight up conquering new lands for the Mamool Ja. Yeah, this is a nation that selects their ruler through military prowess. Thus, it should be pretty unsurprising that they are a people's group that care a lot about their martial skills. Most of the one-headed Mamool Ja seek to hone their skills by either joining one of the aforementioned warbands or becoming adventurers and mercenaries. And that'll move us to, why are they here and how did they get here? Well, to answer this, I'll tell you a story about the history. The current year in game is either 1577 or 1578. And to start the story, we have to go back to 1498, 79 or 80 years ago. This was when a Ruggeden Limzelaminzen explorer named Kettenram sailed westward for quite a while and eventually rediscovered uncharted lands in the sea. He and his crew took to shore in these strange lands and eventually made contact with the apparently very large and thriving nation of Mamool Ja. Now, this is a rediscovery because of this lore bit. This isn't important to the Mamool Ja, so pause if you want to read this, but I thought it was interesting enough to at least have here. Carrying on, we should note that on this meeting, the Mamool Ja were not hostile. Defensive and on guard, sure, but who wouldn't be when some strange folk just show up in your territory? In fact, you could even arguing they were welcoming, because upon their contact, Kettenram and his crew were given directions and told to make their way to the Mamool Ja capital to personally speak with the Autarch, their leader. Kettenram and his crew followed the directions to the Mamool Ja capital, and when they arrived, they gave the Autarch offerings of Eorzean goods. The Autarch was so impressed by how different, rare, and unique these items were that he granted Kettenram and his crew allowance to completely freely roam his nation for as long as they would like, as well as a gift of a huge idol forged from pure silver. After exploring the Mamool Ja territory for a year and gathering a bunch of different plant seeds, Kettenram and his crew made their way back to Limzelaminze, and word of his discovery very quickly spread, especially word that the Mamool Ja gave him a giant statue made of pure silver. The pirates really liked hearing that. So in the same year, the golden age of Limzen exploration had begun, and numerous pirate bands tried to sail to the New World. Now, with how frequent contact with the Eorzeans became, the Mamool Ja learnt more and more about Eorzea, their peoples, but most interesting for them, they learnt of all the Eorzean plights, looking for opportunities to apply themselves as mercenaries and adventurers. This opportunity arrived with the 7th Umbral Calamity. Bahamut going flappy happy flare crazy in Cartonu did, quite a number on Eorzea. Most of the Eorzean workforce were either dead or severely injured, and the city-states were, well, let's just say they've seen better days and were in desperate need for outside help to get work done. Now, depending on who you ask, because there is conflicting sources on this, the Mamool Ja either learnt of the Eorzean plight and set sail themselves to claim glory and profit from the suffering, or they were called over by the Eorzeans who were pleading for their help. Keep this in mind when we carry on going over their history. When the Mamool Ja were either called over or found out about the Eorzean plight, a huge number of them went to Eorzea, and they immediately set about doing numerous different tasks, from finding lost family members, slaying monsters, or even help rebuilding houses or doing farm work by tilling soil. Of course, the Mamool Ja did not do this for free. After all, they are adventurers and mercenaries for hire. But the constant competition between other Mamool Ja groups actually kept their prices quite reasonable. However, eventually the Eorzeans started to recover, and more of their own workforce and adventurers were returning. Suddenly, practically all Mamool Ja were no longer being given any work, the work going back to the Eorzeans. And this forced many of them to either turn to banditry to make ends meet, or taking on contracts with the beast tribes, such as the kobolds, who at this time were still very hostile with Limsa Lominsa. So, in my opinion, depending on if they were called to help or made their own way here, paints quite a different picture of what's going on with them now. Especially when, in the most extreme case, Uldar, and of course it's Uldar, has banned Mamool Ja from even entering the city, those already there being kicked out. The only reason these two Blue Mage Mamool Ja are allowed in is because Royce, the very rich owner of the Colosseum, greased a few palms to let them in. Money, after all, is the only thing that matters in Uldar. Now, one last small tidbit of their culture before we finish off with the last two talking points. The Mamool Ja apparently have some sort of traditional bathing dance that is, let's say, incredibly risque. Like full nude, nearly grinding on each other sort of risque. Basically, they dance as if they're on the Crystal server. Granted, we don't know a lot about this dance, and we're not even certain if it's actually a real traditional dance, or if it's just because the Mamool Ja who tries to perform this dance belongs in horny jail. Good old Scarface Bugal Ja. Their religion and God. We know literally nothing about their religion. Nada. Zilch. So, instead, here's a clip of Godbird putting the fear of God into some people. Their naming conventions. So, unfortunately, Mamool Ja naming is another thing we have very little information on. We don't know if there's a difference in naming between the three tribes of Mamool Ja, nor if there's a difference in naming between the sexes. However, from the few names we have, it doesn't appear that either of these is the case. What we do know is that all Mamool Ja names follow the exact same pattern. Consonant, vowel, consonant, same vowel twice, consonant, and then followed by the word Ja. However, if the Mamool Ja is one of the blessed siblings and therefore has two heads, their name can, but doesn't have to, drop the last consonant and must now end with two Jas. But yeah, there we have it. This is all we currently know about the Mamool Ja. Hopefully, if/when we explore the new world, we'll find out more. As for the next beast tribe we'll be discussing, it'll be the tribe they've expanded upon with Endwalker, the elephant-like people of Favnir, the great colourful folk of expert alchemists. Next it'll be the Matanga. But for now, goodbye my friends, and have a great day.